growing weary of running from room to room, practicing one-tooth insurance-driven dentistry? Then stay tuned for the latest episode of The Lionhearted, where Dr. Stephen Rasner will hand you the blueprint for what many call the gold standard of general practice dentistry.
Hi everyone, it's Dr. Steve Rasner, and welcome to The Lionhearted Dentist. We are winding down the 2020 calendar year, and we've been talking for the last several podcasts about things you can do, things that don't cost any money actually, to start improving your bottom line right now in case you are experiencing a downturn or an inconsistent flow of revenues due to an inconsistent flow of patient acceptance or new patients into the office, or even related to the virus, a more moth-eaten hygiene schedule than you've had in 2019. And I know for many of us, that was very much the case in October and November of this year, because almost all of us were in lockdown mode exactly 6 months ago. It's happened to me. So definitely my hygiene schedules were lighter. And you've always heard me say, and it's true, that a strong hygiene schedule is a backbone. It is a cornerstone of a successful dental practice. That's why I put so much emphasis into having a ongoing recall program in your office of some sort. We talked about that in the last podcast, because it is such a viable part of what you do each day. I mean, when you go to recall, it is a potential for spin-off work. And especially those of you early in your careers, I think it's an understatement that this is a critical part of your practice. But at the end of the last podcast, I briefly mentioned another way to help yourselves right now, if you are in any sort of a downturn, is to look at your expenses. And I reached back into my protocol book for the protocol that's called the Audit Every Vendor Protocol. And you got to understand, these are real. I don't make these up on the fly. These are things I do, things I've done. Some of them I don't do for a while after I've done it. And the Audit Every Vendor Protocol always came down in my practice following some type of turn down in cash flow, because that's the most likely time you're going to start looking at the nooks and crannies of what's wrong here. Why are my expenses so high and my revenues flat? And I will assure you that most of you just don't ever do this actual exercise. And what it involves is taking somebody you trust. Those of you that have a family member involved in the practice, that's the perfect time to enlist them for this. Or usually it's the comptroller of the office, the person that aligns all the bills that you pay each week. And again, the mission is to go through every single check that you write on a given month. And the challenge is, can we do better? I don't care if it's a telephone bill. Let me just give you an example. The last time I did this and it brought significant returns was about 4 years ago. And I saved well over 6 digits, over $100,000 by having this exercise happen. And things I found out, I mean, some of them are very menial. Like perhaps some of you, when you look at your telephone bill, I assure you that some of you are paying for services with your telephone vendor that you don't use, like messaging on hold. That happened to me. I know it doesn't sound like much, but you probably write checks to 50 plus vendors a month. So maybe obviously a more obvious one would be your supply company. Can you save any money? You're never going to know if you don't ask, or if someone doesn't represent you. Our conversations would go like, we're trying to reduce our overhead. You've been our supplier, our main supplier for many, many years. We want to know how we can save some money. What's wrong with that conversation? They may tell you, well, if you pay us on the 10th of each month, we will take off X percent. I will tell you, when I did this exercise with my dental lab, that's exactly what happened. And dental labs probably won't like me saying this, but we also were a big significant account. And I have more than one dental lab. But we saved 10%. I don't expect all of you are going to save 10%. And we didn't threaten them, but the implication that we need to save money and going to our big go-to bill people, how can we do that? You help me. I'm probably not saying that right. It's from the Jerry Maguire movie. You know, if you don't ask, you're just, if you don't take the shot, you're not going to score. But there was other things I found, particularly in all the insurances that you utilize to cover your business and for your personal insurance. We found significant waste. So what would you have to lose by not doing this? So I would highly encourage you to do this. While we're on that subject, you can't make money at maximum potential if you don't know where your money's going. And obviously, this all falls under the umbrella. It's not what you gross, it's what sticks. So here's the question. Be honest. Is your billing under control? Have you even stopped to look and consider that? Is your billing under control? Right now, if I asked you, what is your system for billing people in your office? Would you really know what it is? And would it be reliable? I'm sure for some of you the answer would be yes. I'm sure for many of you it would be what my answer was often in my career. I don't know. I'll give you an example. How we did billing in our office. And remember, I've been getting paid up front for many, many years. And I still had a billing problem in my office because I don't get paid up front 100% of the time. You know, anybody comes on a podcast and says anything to you that's absolute, then it's absolutely probably not true. So, you know, there's patients that we like pay in thirds, or there's special circumstances. But I assure you, for the most part, we do get paid up front. And we utilize a number of patient financing to make that happen, from Lending Club to Care Credit to Green Sky. And you should have more than one, and that's a conversation for another day. But in my office, when I asked that question, I was told, well, we divide the alphabet into 4. So on the first week of the month, we bill A through H, and then I through whatever onwards as we divide the alphabet into 4. I said, okay, that seems reasonable. What do we do if they don't pay, and how do you track it? Seriously, do you have an unbreakable system in place? Because what you need to know is that the research is clear that you have a 20% chance, 20, of collecting an old balance that's older than 90 days. And I can tell you that I learned that the hard way. About 8 years ago, I hired a forensic accountant, not to look into fraud. I just was going through one of the periods I'm alluding to right now, and I didn't know where all the money was. It seemed like we grossed more than enough money that I should have more in the bank. And as it turned out, I found I had over $200,000 in finished, completed services that were out on the street. And you know what I heard from patients when that project became a project? That they hadn't received a bill in months or years. And good luck with collecting that, even if they owe you. So you need to be on top. For goodness sakes, it's hard enough, isn't it? Doing what we do for you. And those of you that participate in insurance, I'm going to get to that next. Those of you that participate in insurance, to not collect what's actually owed to you because you don't have a system is just not an acceptable answer. So I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm trying to make you open your eyes up to things that really don't cost money. We're really talking about diligence right now of you, the doctor, as to are you getting paid for the services that indeed you complete. It's hard enough dealing with the insurance companies who try to downgrade all your services. And then on top of that, they want to, take off, 30% plus of your actual fee. So now that we're talking about insurance, are you aware, if you went to the office tomorrow, of the status of your 60, 90, 120 day accounts receivable? And it's your insurance department in your office, and I know for some of you, it's one person who has multiple jobs that they do. So maybe this is one of the jobs. In other offices, it's a full-time position, maybe that more than one person has. Do you know that answer? Have you looked at that? Because do you understand that, and I know this sounds parochial to some of you, but the insurance companies look for reasons not to pay you, to kick back the claim. And when I did this exercise the last time when we were taking insurance, what I found out is that they look for everything from group numbers to provider license numbers for correct insurance, all the insurance information, on the patient's information, their address, their dates of birth, their gender, their member ID. Is the patient even active with insurance? I mean, there were some of the reasons I had the $200,000 on the street of completed services, because my insurance department was not taking a daily active investigative role, and some people had lost their insurance and we didn't know it. I would tell you that you owe it to yourself, if you aren't quite as busy right now, or even if you are, to please look at these parameters, because the last thing you can do is not collect the money that you have earned. And what I did, when I found out, is I had a very, what I call a dirty database. So I literally hired an ex-insurance person, because my size practice, doing over $4 million a year, it wasn't going to get done quick enough any other way. So I brought somebody in for a period of 6 months. They actually work from home, those of you with bigger practices. And their job was to clean up the data on every single patient in the practice that had insurance. And it took from one recall visit to the next. And that's what we did. So remember, and then the last thing I will say to you about money is never, ever trust the data that you're given. I don't care if the person's been with you, unless it's your family. I don't care if the person's been with you for 25 years. You need to randomly check out your own monthly bills, your checking accounts, your everything. Your own eyes, or somebody that's equal to you in interest in the business has to do that. And I know that sounds, of course I do that. Yeah, of course you do that when you have a $500,000 a year practice, but it becomes difficult to do that when your revenues get much higher. So think about all the things I've been talking about in the last 2 podcasts. I haven't told you one thing other than if you hired a forensic accountant like I did, which cost me $5,000, by the way. I'm not telling you to do that. I am telling you, which I've said recently, that strategy is a higher priority if you're struggling from the pandemic this year. Strategy is a higher priority than spending. So with all due respect to all the dental suppliers out there, buying a CAD cam or buying any expensive piece of equipment, a laser, all good things to have, is not nearly, to me, as important or what I would do when it comes to fixing my practice. I told you this a few weeks ago, and I think it's worth reiterating. I would meet every 2 weeks. I would meet at the beginning of a day. It's hard to do this. It's hard when you're struggling to proactively block out scheduled production time so you can meet with your staff to turn this thing around. it is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, and probably for you too. If missing an hour or an hour and a half even every 2 weeks is going to bring your corporation down, then there's many other problems that you don't know about. And you have to work on projects that will address all the things I've been talking about. Cash flow, improving overhead. That's the vendor call revendor protocol. Improving morale, by the way. You can't lose sight. It's very easy in a depressed state of a practice. And by the way, I don't want to imply all of you are going through this, but I mean, it might be naive of me not to address this in a time when we've all lost 2 months in 2020. I did. And it doesn't make it easier. So forgive me, but I do think I want to bring this up. Identify areas that you need to improve in these meetings. And these are all written out ahead of time. Go back to my old podcast where I talked about the way to run these meetings. Or write to me if you don't want to go back, and I'll send it to you again. The lack of returning patients, which goes along with a moth-eaten hygiene schedule. Maybe it's lack of case acceptance. Everything I'm talking about, we've addressed in these podcasts. Poor cash flow. Well, get paid up front. Lack of case acceptance. Work on the whole thing from the first phone call to when you were going to the room. It's probably the topic that I've covered more than any other topic. Poor communications in the office, which lead to bumps. Bumps often lead to lost patients or poor morale. Institute, as I mentioned last week, recall quotas. What do you have to lose? You know, maybe there's team members listening right now, and you may be thinking, what can I do? What can I do? I really love this doctor. I've been with him X amount of years. If you have a decent voice, the best thing you can do for your practice is recall. I don't care if you came up with 3 patients a week. Every 3 weeks, you would have come up with 1 full day of recall. So the last thing I will tell you, a couple things I want to tell you. Understand, this is for you, doctor, that instituting new and better ways will always fail if the team doesn't see you as fully committed to this change. Everything I'm telling you is doable. It is exactly what I do. It is exactly what I've done. Sometimes I stop what I'm talking about to tell you that because it hits me in the head that I hope you believe this, that the net result is that my practice has endured the pandemic. I mean, we're not killing it, but we're doing 2019 numbers, which was a good year for me. You know, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I'm up 10 or 15%, because I'm not. But we're maintaining the numbers we did the year before. And that's okay to me, because you've also heard me say this thing has forced many of us to slow down a little bit. And I don't know, when you're into practice for 40 years, if that's the worst thing in the world. But I will tell you, a good example is that if you're going to have meetings to turn this thing around, and you have the guts to do that, you will never write back to me and say it didn't work or that it resulted in a negative outcome by stopping and meeting in a planned hour or hour and 15 minute session to start changing how you do things is a very hard thing to buy into. I get it. And it's a very, very good thing for you to buy into. I tried a couple times. You think doing it for 1 month is going to ruin your organization? See if I'm fibbing or if I'm exaggerating. But that's a good example of where you may not buy into it. Maybe you'll do one and you'll cancel the next one 2 weeks later. And then the next one will be 3 months after that. And guess what? You did waste time if that was the case. You did. You have to you have to buy in and try things and stick to them first, just like advertising. Nobody would advertise one marketing brand strategy one time and expect a result. Also, stop being an island unto yourself. Like if you're watching me right now, then you're not exercising being an island unto yourself. So maybe that doesn't apply to you. But find mentors, start networking, even if you hate it. Let me give you one example. So find somebody that you respect and trust. I mean, you can reach out to me. I mean, I didn't have this social media platform early in my career. You do. So there wasn't a way to ask, what do I pay for your dental labs, for example? That's a good example. I think most of us have more than one lab, right? You have a lab that you use for really high end. It's got to be amazing. Crown number 8, single unit, all in. And you don't always need that for every single unit you do. But you want a good quality lab, and for that middle of the road lab. And I'm here to tell you, and that may sound controversial to you, but I don't care. I'm here to be honest with you. How do you know you're not overpaying if you don't have a certain person to compare to? You know? Or how do you know what the best way is to pay your hygiene team? That's another example. Or when to give a raise, or what a policy should be for days off. You know, you have the platforms today more than I ever did, or those of my generation ever did. So use them, please. I'll leave you with just a little bit of a thing about your team, because the team's everything, especially right now. And you've heard me talk about this over and over again with regard to the patients walking in to the office and palpably feeling this is a different place than they're used to. That's all team. So how do you motivate team? I will tell you this. It's just, my experience has been that with offices, and even my office, when I bought into a formalized, calculated plan, I mean literally calculated, that if we increase our gross by such and such, the office staff will get this if we reach this level or that level. And I'm sure many of you listening have had success with that. My experience has been that always fails over time. It may work for even a year, but over time, it fails. And if it doesn't last for years and years, then why participate with it to begin with? You'll end up giving tens of thousands of dollars, which would be fine with me if it resulted in something lasting and good. I will tell you, there's a number of ways to motivate your team today. And money is one of them, but I will tell you that it has to come in an unexpected bonus for a job well done and hard work that you've witnessed. There is unequivocal evidence to me that if you're going to bonus your team, bonusing them along with their regular check, whatever amount of money you think's appropriate, $300, $500, along with a note that backs up why you did it, is amazingly more long-term impactful than a set out, calculated, that some management guru told you about or you read about in a magazine. There are many, many studies that have shown over the last 3 decades that employees that expect to receive a reward for completing a task or doing a task successfully simply don't perform as well, believe it or not, as those that did not expect a reward at all. And this all goes back to who you hired and when you hired them. And did you look through, did you even think about, as you're at that interview, or your manager, that they were self-motivated, these people? Are they driven? Are they going the extra mile? Are they hungry? I mean, they have fire in their belly. These are not common traits that sit across your desk. Often what sits across your desk is they need a job. And, you know, if you're not even thinking those things, and I'll end with this. Sometimes you just have to be patient. I've been looking for a dental assistant in our organization for about 3 months. And I actually hired at least 1 or 2 that didn't make it because out of need. And sometimes you have to do that. So I'm sharing that with you. Sometimes we know it's not, we didn't get a 10. Sometimes they didn't show those traits I just reviewed with you. But we kept looking. That's the difference. I didn't take the ads down. I kept them up. And I really thought, honest to God, I was embarrassed. I literally was embarrassed that maybe, what kind of organization do I have? It always was easy for me to fill those positions. And in the last 3 weeks, I've had 3 very, very credible applicants come in for those jobs because I kept looking because I knew in my heart I didn't hire who I really wanted to. So we need to go over that in a future podcast. I would tell you I motivate the way you would read about. Be positive, be proactive, be fair, acknowledge. But just doing it strictly with money is a short-sighted strategy, in my opinion. I mean, continued education training for all your staff is motivating. Loyalty to them, flexibility if you can be. Like maybe they want to go to college still or take courses at a local college, even though it's got nothing to do. In fact, it may be the end of your relationship with them in years to come. There's a lot to be said about what gives, in my particular case of 18 employees that averaged over 20 years with me. And that doesn't mean I never have turnover, but I do have a lot of staff that have stayed over the years. It's probably been, I would think it's safe to tell you that none of those employees have ever been with me at the time when I had a program that if we produce this over a period of 3 months or more, you will get this. I do not endorse those because the results of those are short term. And I'm not saying that to get the staff mad at me. I just want it to work for both of you. So I hope this helps you guys. Please reach out to me about anything you want me to cover in these days that can be troubling, but I've tried to go over things in the last couple podcasts that you can act on immediately. And I believe the return will be very, very worth it. So hang in there. Thanks for tuning in. Please email me, drrasner@aol.com, and stay strong. See you, Lionhearted Dentist, next week.